Karen was still screaming when the bulldozer blade smashed through her HOA office wall. Papers flew everywhere like confetti. Her voice got higher and higher as she watched her fake kingdom fall apart right in front of her eyes. Before you watch complete story, comment down from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe. I stood there calm, my boots planted on the dirt I own, watching years of HOA lies turn into broken pieces. The bulldozer operator didn't stop. He had his orders from the county judge. "You can't do this," Karen yelled, running toward the big machine like she could stop it with her hands. "This is our community building." "No, Karen," I called out over the loud noise of the bulldozer. "This is my land. It always was." The look on her face when she finally understood was perfect. You ever see someone realize they picked a fight with the wrong person? That moment when their fake power breaks and they know they're about to lose everything? 3 months ago, Karen thought she owned my lake. She was very wrong about that. It all started the morning I found my boat at the bottom of the water. Old Ruby was a wooden fishing boat from 1973 that my dad built with his own hands. She was sitting 20 feet down in the mud like a treasure chest. But this wasn't an accident. Someone had sunk her on purpose. I put on my diving gear and went down to check what happened. The boat was okay, but someone had cut the rope and opened the drain plug. This was not an accident. This was someone trying to hurt me. When I came back up, Karen was standing on my dock with 2 men in matching shirts carrying clipboards. "Good morning, Mason," she said in that fake sweet voice she used when she was about to make someone's day bad. "I'm so sorry about your boat problem." "My boat problem?" I wiped water off my face, floating next to my own dock. "Someone sank my boat, Karen." "Well, we had to take emergency action because of the water safety rules. Your boat was leaking oil and making our community lake dirty." "Our community lake?" I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. "Karen, this is my lake. I own it. I pay taxes on the water." She held up her tablet like it was some kind of weapon. "According to our environmental safety check, any boat that leaks oil has to be moved right away to stop pollution. We followed the right steps. You sank my boat. We moved it to a safe place under the water. It's only temporary. Once you pay the environmental cleanup fee and fix the boat to meet our rules, we can talk about getting it back." That's when I knew Karen had crossed a line she couldn't come back from. This wasn't about HOA rules anymore. This was stealing. This was breaking my stuff. This was war. I climbed out of the water and stood on my dock, dripping wet, looking down at this woman who thought she could steal my family's boat and make me pay to get it back. "Karen, you have one chance to tell me this is some kind of joke." "I don't joke about community safety, Mason. Your boat was dangerous and we did what we had to do. The fee list is in the new rules." I walked past her toward my house, water making squishing sounds in my boots. "Get off my property." "Actually, water access is covered by the community sharing agreement. We have every right to be here." I stopped walking and turned around. "What sharing agreement?" Karen smiled like she had just won a card game. "The one that was made when Eagle Crest was built. All lakefront properties have to follow community rules for environmental protection." "Show me the papers." "It's all filed with the county. Anyone can see it." "Then you won't mind if I take a look?" "Of course not. But I should tell you that questioning properly filed legal papers could be considered troublemaker behavior under our community rules." I left her standing on my dock and went inside to make phone calls. The first call was to my insurance company to report my stolen boat. The second was to the county records office to check on this mystery sharing agreement. The third call was to my lawyer. By the time I finished talking to Marcus Webb, my attorney, I was angrier than I'd been in years. But I was also smiling. "Mason, there's no sharing agreement on file anywhere," Marcus told me. "Your property papers show you own the lake and all the land around it. No shared access, no community oversight, no environmental limits except normal county rules." So Karen is lying. Karen is committing fraud. She also committed theft, vandalism, and probably extortion if she's asking for payment for your own boat. We can destroy her legally. "What about this Eagle Crest development? Do they have any real claims?" "I'll look into it, but based on what you're telling me, they built their community thinking they could bully you into giving up your property rights. Big mistake." That afternoon, I drove to the county courthouse and spent 3 hours in the records office. What I found made my blood boil and my heart race at the same time. Karen's HOA had been working under completely fake authority. The Eagle Crest development had real permits for their houses, but nothing that gave them any control over my lake or my land. Even worse, when I traced the property lines, I found something that would change everything. The HOA office building where Karen held her weekly meetings and kept all her fake legal papers was built 30 feet onto my property. Their entire headquarters was trespassing on my land. I sat in my truck in the courthouse parking lot, looking at the survey maps and property papers spread across my dashboard. Karen had sunk my boat while her fake government was illegally squatting on my property. She had threatened me with environmental fines while her own building was breaking county laws by dumping septic water into my lake. The irony was so perfect it hurt. I drove home and found Karen waiting for me again, this time with a bigger group. She had brought what looked like half the Eagle Crest residents, all carrying signs about environmental protection and community safety. "Mason, we need to talk," she announced as I got out of my truck. "The community has serious concerns about your attitude toward working together on lake management." My attitude? I looked around at the crowd of suburban people holding protest signs on my private property. "Karen, you're trespassing. All of you. We're using our right to peaceful assembly about community waterway issues," said a man in khakis who looked like he'd never seen real dirt before. "This affects all of us." "No, it doesn't," I said. "This lake is private property. You don't live here, you don't own any part of it, and you have no rights to be standing where you're standing." Karen stepped forward with her tablet again. "Mason, we understand you're upset about the boat situation, but refusing to work with legitimate environmental oversight is only going to make things worse." Legitimate oversight? I pulled out my own folder, thick with county records and legal papers. "Karen, let me share some facts with you and your friends here." I opened the folder and held up the first paper. "This is my property deed, dated 1952, showing I own this lake and all the land around it for half a mile." People started whispering in the crowd. "This is the county environmental report showing zero pollution in this lake for the past 20 years. More whispers, some nervous moving around. "And this," I said, holding up the survey map, "shows that your HOA office building is built 30 feet onto my private property without permission, permit, or lease agreement." The crowd went quiet. Karen's face went white, then red, then white again. "That's impossible. We have clear ownership of our community building. You have clear ownership of the lot you bought. Unfortunately, your contractor either can't read a survey map or decided to ignore property lines. Either way, your headquarters is illegally squatting on my land." I could see some of the residents starting to back away. The smart ones were realizing they had been following a leader who didn't know what she was talking about. "Furthermore," I continued, "since you want to talk about environmental violations, your building's septic system has been dumping untreated wastewater into my lake for 3 years. I have the soil samples to prove it." Karen was shaking now, either from anger or fear. "You can't prove any of that." "Actually, I can. I spent the afternoon at the county office pulling records. Want to see the environmental violation notices I filed against your building? They're being served tomorrow morning." "This is harassment," Karen said, but her voice was weaker now. "No, Karen. Sinking my boat was harassment. Building on my land without permission was trespassing. Demanding I pay fees to get my own property back was extortion. What I'm doing now is called justice." The crowd was definitely getting smaller now. Turns out people don't like standing around watching their HOA president get legally destroyed in real time. "You have 48 hours to remove that building from my property," I said. "After that, I'm filing for immediate eviction and demolition." "You can't evict a community building." "I can evict any structure illegally placed on my land. Check the county codes, Karen." I already did. That night, I called Marcus again and told him what I had found. He was quiet for a long moment, then started laughing. "Mason, do you realize what you have here? They've been running a fake government on stolen land while committing environmental crimes and demanding tribute from you for property damage they caused themselves. This isn't just a civil case anymore. This is criminal." "What do you mean?" "I mean Karen and her HOA board are looking at fraud charges, theft charges, environmental violation charges, and possibly racketeering if they've been collecting illegal fees from other residents too." "They have been. I have records showing they've been billing people for lake access fees and environmental maintenance that never happened." "Jesus, Mason. They built themselves a criminal enterprise and called it community management. The state is going to love this case." The next few days were like watching a house of cards fall down in slow motion. Karen tried everything she could think of to avoid the inevitable. She hired 3 different lawyers, filed appeals with every county office she could find, and even started a GoFundMe page claiming she was being persecuted by a greedy landowner. But the evidence was overwhelming. Property surveys don't lie. Environmental tests don't lie. County records don't lie. And Karen's own emails and documents, which the county subpoenaed as part of their investigation, showed a pattern of deliberate fraud going back years. During the investigation, we learned that Karen had been running similar scams in 2 other neighborhoods before moving to Eagle Crest. In each case, she had eventually been caught and forced to move, but she had never faced serious consequences because her victims were too embarrassed or scared to fight back legally. This time is different, Marcus told me. We have organized victims, documented evidence, and criminal charges. She's not walking away from this one. The investigation revealed that Karen had been collecting fake fees from 47 different families over 3 years. She had stolen over $180,000 in bogus HOA dues, environmental fees, and lake access charges. Most of the money had gone to fund her lifestyle, expensive vacations, a new BMW, home renovations, and spa treatments. But the boat incident was what finally brought her down. When she deliberately sank Old Ruby, she committed a felony. When she demanded payment to return my own property, she committed extortion. When she lied to county officials about having authority over my lake, she committed fraud. The environmental violations at her building made everything worse. The county discovered that the illegal septic dumping had been contaminating the groundwater for the entire area. The cleanup was going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and Karen's insurance company was already threatening to sue her for fraudulent claims. 2 weeks later, the county environmental inspector showed up at the HOA building with a demolition order. The septic violations were worse than anyone had thought. Not only was the building dumping waste into my lake, but it was also contaminating the drinking water for 3 different neighborhoods. Karen tried to fight it, of course. She held press conferences, organized protests, and even chained herself to the building entrance for 6 hours before the sheriff cut the chain and arrested her for trespassing on my property. But facts don't care about protests. Property lines don't change because you complain about them on social media. And judges really don't like people who build illegal structures while committing environmental crimes and stealing from their neighbors. The demolition was scheduled for a Thursday morning in October. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat on my porch watching the sun come up over my lake. Old Ruby was back where she belonged, floating proudly at my dock after I had her properly restored. The repair bills went straight to Karen's insurance company, along with bills for environmental cleanup, legal fees, and punitive damages. At 8 a.m. sharp, the county vehicles started arriving. Sheriff's cars, environmental safety trucks, and finally the demolition crew with their bulldozers and backhoes. I had never seen so many official vehicles in one place. Karen showed up about 30 minutes later, screeching into the parking lot like she was arriving at a fire. She jumped out of her car wearing her best business suit and carrying a briefcase, looking like she was about to argue a case before the Supreme Court. "This is illegal," she shouted before she was even close enough for anyone to hear her properly. "You can't demolish community property without proper hearings and appeals." Sheriff Morrison walked over to her calmly. He was a patient man who had dealt with Karen's complaints for months. "Ma'am, this structure has been condemned for environmental violations and illegal placement on private property. The appeals process was completed last week. I demand to see the paperwork." The sheriff handed her a thick folder. Demolition order, environmental violation notice, trespassing citation, and eviction judgment. All signed by Judge Patterson. Karen flipped through the papers, her face getting redder with each page. "This is a conspiracy. Mason Briggs has been bribing officials to steal community property. Ma'am, you need to step back from the demolition zone. The building will be coming down in 10 minutes. You can't do this. I won't let you." That's when Karen made her biggest mistake. She ran toward the building entrance like she was going to chain herself to the door again. 2 deputies caught her gently but firmly and walked her back to the safety area. "Ma'am, you're interfering with a legal demolition. Please remain behind the yellow tape." The bulldozer operator looked at the sheriff, who nodded. The engine roared to life, and the massive blade moved toward the building's front wall. Karen broke free from the deputies and ran toward the bulldozer again, screaming something about community rights and environmental protection. The operator stopped immediately and looked at the sheriff again. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for interfering with a legal proceeding," Sheriff Morrison said, pulling out his handcuffs. "You can't arrest me. I'm the president of the Homeowners Association. You're the president of an organization that built an illegal structure on stolen land while committing environmental crimes. Right now you're a private citizen obstructing justice." As they led Karen to the patrol car, she was still screaming about property rights and community standards. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "This isn't over," she yelled as they put her in the back seat. "I'll sue all of you. I'll have your jobs. This community will remember what you did here today. The first wall came down with a satisfying crunch. Years of fake authority and manufactured power crumbled into dust and debris. The conference table where Karen had held her weekly meetings about lake management ended up in splinters. The filing cabinets full of fake legal documents got crushed under tons of rubble. The crowd that had gathered to watch was mostly Eagle Crest residents, and their reactions were mixed. Some looked upset, but many looked relieved. I overheard one woman say to her husband, "Maybe now we can actually have a normal neighborhood association instead of Karen's dictatorship." By noon the building was gone. Nothing left but a concrete slab and a pile of debris that would be hauled away by the end of the week. The demolition crew worked with the efficiency of people who knew they were doing the right thing. I walked over to where the building had stood and planted a small sign in the dirt, "Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted." But the story wasn't over yet. The environmental cleanup took another month. The contaminated soil had to be excavated and replaced. The groundwater had to be tested and treated. The cost kept climbing, and it all went straight to Karen's insurance company, which promptly dropped her and filed suit for fraud. During the cleanup, more evidence of Karen's crimes came to light. Hidden in the building's basement were boxes of financial records showing the full scope of her operation. She had been stealing money not just from Eagle Crest residents, but from people in 2 other neighborhoods where she had previously lived. The FBI got involved when they realized Karen had been running a multi-state fraud operation. She had been moving from neighborhood to neighborhood, setting up fake HOAs, collecting illegal fees, and then disappearing when people started asking questions. Eagle Crest was supposed to be her biggest score yet, but instead it became the place where her luck finally ran out. Karen was eventually charged with 47 counts of fraud, 12 counts of theft, 8 counts of environmental crimes, and 1 count of racketeering. The prosecution had so much evidence that her lawyers advised her to plea bargain. She ended up pleading guilty to 15 felony counts in exchange for a sentence of 8 years in federal prison and full restitution to her victims. Her house, her BMW, and all her other assets were seized to pay back the money she had stolen. The restitution hearing was particularly satisfying. One by one, neighbors testified about the money Karen had stolen from them and the emotional damage her harassment had caused. Elderly residents talked about being afraid to use their own backyards because of her constant threats and fines. Mrs. Patterson, a 78-year-old widow, broke down crying as she described how Karen had made her feel like a criminal in her own home. "She told me I couldn't plant flowers in my front yard without HOA approval," Mrs. Patterson said. "I've been gardening for 60 years, but she made me feel like I was doing something wrong just by living in my own house." The judge was clearly moved by the testimony. "Ms. Henderson, you preyed on your neighbors' trust and good nature. You turned peaceful communities into places of fear and conflict for your own financial gain. The court finds your actions particularly egregious because you targeted vulnerable elderly residents and young families who trusted you to act in their best interests." Karen's lawyer tried to argue for leniency, claiming she had been trying to help the community and had gotten carried away with her authority. But the evidence was too strong and the victims too numerous for any sympathy. The defendant created a sophisticated criminal enterprise disguised as community service, the judge said. She forged documents, impersonated officials, and systematically defrauded dozens of families over multiple years. This was not misguided community leadership. This was calculated, premeditated fraud designed to enrich herself at the expense of innocent people. The total restitution order was $340,000, plus interest and legal fees. Since Karen had already spent most of the stolen money, the victims had to settle for whatever they could recover from the sale of her assets. But for most of us it wasn't really about the money. It was about justice. It was about proving that bullies can't win just because they're loud and aggressive. It was about standing up to someone who thought she could steal from her neighbors and call it community service. The Eagle Crest development never fully recovered from the scandal. Once word got out that their HOA had been operating as a criminal enterprise, property values crashed. Many residents moved away within a year, embarrassed to be associated with the neighborhood where Karen Henderson had run her fake government. The ones who stayed formed a legitimate homeowners association with actual legal authority over their own properties. They hired a real property management company and established transparent financial procedures. Most importantly, they learned to question authority instead of blindly following anyone who claimed to be in charge. They never bothered me again about my lake or my property. In fact, several of them apologized for supporting Karen's harassment campaign. They admitted they had been scared of her threats and had gone along with her demands rather than risk becoming her next target. These days my lake is peaceful again. Old Ruby purrs like a kitten when I take her out for morning fishing trips. The water is cleaner than it's been in years now that the illegal septic dumping has stopped. Fish populations have recovered, and the lake ecosystem is healthier than ever. Sometimes I sit on my dock in the evening, watching the sun set over the water my grandfather bought 70 years ago. I think about Karen and her fake kingdom, built on lies and supported by people who were too scared to question her authority. The thing about bullies is they only have power if you let them have it. The moment you stand up and say, no, the moment you demand to see their actual authority, their whole world falls apart. Karen spent years convincing people she had power over them, but in the end she had no real power at all. She thought she could steal my boat and charge me to get it back. She thought she could build her empire on my land and call it community property. She thought she could intimidate me into submission like she had intimidated so many others. She thought wrong. Now there's a nice patch of grass where her office used to be. I mow it myself every couple of weeks just to keep things tidy. Sometimes kids from the neighborhood come by to play on the empty lot, running around and laughing like kids should. It's amazing how peaceful a place becomes once you remove the people who were never supposed to be there in the first place. The lake is quiet now, except for the sound of water lapping against the shore and the occasional call of a loon. That's the way it should be. Karen learned that the hard way, but she learned it. And my lake? My lake remembers who really owns it. It always has, and it always will. The best part is that other people have heard this story and used it to fight back against their own HOA bullies. I get emails from people all over the country who were inspired to check their property deeds and challenge fake authorities in their own neighborhoods. Justice has a way of spreading just like Karen's crimes did. But unlike her operation, justice is built on truth, and truth has a way of winning in the end.